user groups. I especially love small HubSpot user groups. I just feel like that's what it's about. It's like getting in a room and we're like sharing I don't know all the answers. I know some things about new tools, but like I'll say some things and then we can just have an open discussion about strategy and about questions about the software and whatever it is. So yeah, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to do these and I'm always happy to be in touch. I have a deck that I can kind of like quickly go through in terms of just the lay of the land with the new hub. And then maybe from there, I'm happy to like show some of the software, or if we want to just completely detach and go in a different direction, I'm happy to do that too, especially with such a small group. It's like, doesn't really make sense if I'm talking about things that are unrelated to the problems you're actually dealing with every day. So maybe I'll start with the deck real quick and then maybe 10 minutes there. How's that sound?
Yeah, I like
and
it.
feel free if like come off mute, shout at me whenever you feel like it. This is my goal is not just to talk at you for a while. Let's get here. And actually, let me just get it. Here we go. All right. Everybody see my screen okay? Thumbs up. Quick introduction to me. So I'm a principal marketing manager, I guess, at HubSpot. I actually have been here for almost 10 years, which is crazy. I joined in early 2012 in the support team. I led a team on the support side. I moved into the services org. And I've been on the product marketing side since 2016. The good news about 10 years is that every 5 years at HubSpot, we get a sabbatical where we get to take a month off and go wherever we choose. And I'm approaching my 10-year sabbatical early next year. So if you guys have ideas on what to do with a month off, or aspirations.
I was going to ask you, are you going, you already have a place they're going to? Or?
I haven't figured, I feel like with COVID and planning, I just haven't even thought that far ahead. But I don't know, maybe Greenville? Should I come to Greenville? Should I go to Monterey? I'm an open book.
Yeah.
A little more about me, just my personal adventures here. I grew up in Vermont, and I, like most people in Vermont, love ice cream, addicted to Ben and Jerry's. I moved to New Hampshire when I was a teenager, and I'm a big hiker, so I've hiked all the high peaks in my native New Hampshire. I married my wife at City Hall in Boston. I actually spent the last 2 years until 2019, until 2021 in Dublin, Ireland, in our Dublin office. And last winter, I worked remotely from the West Coast USA. Did a bunch of skiing after work and on weekends, and just explored new places. So all about adventures and all about HubSpot. Quick questions for you guys, like just shout out here. Who's native to South Carolina? Is everybody from South Carolina? All right, we got the ladies in the room. What else?
I was born here and then I moved away.
Josh, where'd you move and then what brought you back?
Yeah, I moved to Indiana. That's where my family was from. And then I came back to South Carolina to go to school. Yeah.
Got it.
And then haven't been able to get away.
I was gonna say, will you ever leave again?
Sure, I'd love to.
Nice. First HubSpot user group, anybody? Everybody's been before. Oh, nice. Couple new folks. How long have folks been using HubSpot? Are you new to HubSpot or just new to the user group?
We've been using HubSpot probably for about 2 years now.
Okay, nice. And you're using just for marketing mostly? You guys are the marketing team.
We started with marketing, just with like direct like email campaigns and things like that. We have now moved over to the CRM and using that as our management tool for our sales. And there's so many bells and whistles to HubSpot, so we're just kind of exploring other ways to utilize it, perhaps bringing our ticketing system to HubSpot. Just we're growing rapidly and just trying to help it grow with us, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about the others in the room? How long have you been using HubSpot and which parts of HubSpot?
I've been using it for 2 years. Both have been CRM experiences. I was at a startup and their sales team was kind of all over the map. So we started using HubSpot to get everybody organized and proactive in their sales approach. And then I moved over to a different company last year, and kind of doing the same thing, just getting all the sales team to be using one thing that enables them to be a proactive salesperson.
Yeah. So just kind of transitioning from no CRM into having a CRM for the first time and getting their act together.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Joseph, what about you?
Yeah, so I've been using it pretty hardcore for various things in 21. Before that, I used it like for about 2 years off and on. And I've used it so this year I've mostly used it in small SMB kind of settings, you know, super scrappy, very experimental. And then before that, I barely touched it in an enterprise environment. So yeah, I've seen it operate differently in different orgs for sure.
What's your role? Like what org do you lead?
Well, so right now I'm on the global marketing team for a SaaS product for Ingram Micro. So, you know, but it's pretty much like a startup within this, you know, multinational conglomerate, but we're like a really small, like close knit team doing some really cool stuff. And I acquired a HubSpot instance and some great agencies that are a great agency partner that's helping me. And I think, I'm pretty sure it's RevM. I'm pretty sure they're certified. They're actually based in UK. But yeah, so inheriting instances, all that kind of fun stuff, unpicking, you know, flows. It's a fun experience.
Yeah, I feel like I know how that goes. Thank you guys for sharing. It sounds like my next question here was around, does your company have an operations team? It sounds like, Joseph, some of the work you're doing, kind of unpicking the flows and all that kind of thing, it's a lot of operations work, but maybe without the operations title. What's the nature of, like, when we say operations, what does that mean for you guys or at your companies?
I guess I think of it as, you know, all the component parts, and sales is part of that. So then how do we bring the sales component into that, and so that the sales team is aware of the whole flow of how things go, so that we don't set up other areas for failure. It's kind of what I'm hoping to kind of see and experience through it.
Yeah. What else? Kate, did you want to hop in?
Yeah. So we don't technically have an operations team, but I agree with him. Like, I mean, we are, since a smaller group, so we all are, and we were looking to grow. So how we all work together, how it flows. We all want to grow together and not lose sight of what each department is doing, because everybody is very important in the whole entire process, from, you know, getting your customer to keeping that customer and keeping them long term. So right now, you know, operations are good, but we definitely need to define the roles better, how things will flow. And that's kind of a good growing pain for us at the moment that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a good problem to run into, that you have like so much happening that you need to wrangle it. It's better than the alternative of not having that much happening. Nice. Well, so this, I'll go through a little bit here, which is kind of narrative-y about operations teams. I would say stay perked up. It won't be as relevant given that you all don't work in operations and don't necessarily have a specialized operations team yet. But the features we're going to talk about are relevant no matter what. Like, they're useful, plain and simple. They address problems that a scaling company has, even if you don't have somebody with ops in their title. But that said, kind of taking a step back and why we call this Ops Hub and what it's rooted in what we see in the world. What we notice is, I think what you were just talking about, Kate, is that as scale happens, data and systems pile up, and that makes friction happen, both for the customer and also internal friction, handoffs between teams, integrations between things, you know, misset data and so on. And what we found in talking to a lot of teams is that, especially as you get bigger, ops is the team, the operations, the data people are the ones that end up getting buried under that friction. So we've talked to a lot of people on the ops side, and we've gotten some pretty colorful quotes from them. The one on the right here, when you're in ops, you learn to eat, and I paraphrase, crow with a smile on your face. You do the hardest work, you never get the praise or the credit. The bottom left, the majority of my job is untangling systems and untracing steps. So the people that are in charge of doing the operational work and keeping the glue together, keeping the process and the systems and the data together, just end up kind of unwrangling things and dealing with tech debt. That's what we see happening in the world. Summarizing here, that ops today is tends to be siloed and reactive. And so even if you're in marketing or sales and maybe you work with an operations person or you have in the past, like my experience with an operations team is that I go to them when I have a one-off reporting need or something is broken in my system, and I bring them in to put out the fire, right? And I think that's one way of doing things. It's not the ideal way. But in addition to having this persona, these people that are kind of disempowered, HubSpot software hasn't done a great job at making their life easy. So our automation, our integrations, our reporting, all the kind of data plumbing in the back end of HubSpot has been okay, but not great. So at HubSpot, when we have this kind of a problem, we have a persona that isn't getting the credit that they deserve, that's getting reactive work, that's getting buried under this friction of scale, and they need software they need a new playbook, and they kind of need software to support that playbook. That gets us at HubSpot thinking. We create a new playbook, we call that RevOps. The idea of RevOps is pretty straightforward. Instead of having 3 different operations teams, siloed sales ops and marketing ops and service ops reporting into a single, reporting into independent VPs, into a VP of sales, VP of marketing, and so on, that you unite your operations in one horizontal team that's united. They're strategic. They work across sales, marketing, and service. And that helps the business to run smoothly at scale, and it helps the customer experience to stay connected at scale as well. So that's the playbook. Another way of looking at that and more HubSpot graphics is we talk about the flywheel a lot, that everything kind of revolves around the customer, and that sales, service, marketing feed into each other. In the past, RevOps has been, operations has been thought of as kind of you don't build it until late in the game, you build it in silos, and you don't invest in it that much. And they just help to put out the fires to keep the flywheel from burning to the ground. We think of RevOps as really central, as united, and as the kind of lubricant or the grease that makes the flywheel spin even faster at scale. And we invest heavily in it. At HubSpot, we just transitioned in the past year our own team internally to RevOps. We have no more silos of operations across marketing and sales and services, and with much success so far. That's the kind of playbook. This operations world is broken. We think there's a better way, and it's RevOps. What is RevOps exactly? I think this was a question maybe you were getting at earlier, Josh. Like, how do you even think about this? We like alliteration at HubSpot. So we got 3 Ps for RevOps, and we're aligning our team around this as well. Platform, process, perspective. The idea is that you have somebody who's in charge of platform is like just connecting all the data in one place. It's integrating things, trying to find that elusive single source of truth, right? It's integrations. The process is all the automation that goes into making that information consistent, making it efficient, making it clean, getting it to the right person. And then perspective is all about the business level insights and reporting. So not necessarily like, Kate, maybe your email stats would just come from within the marketing org, but if you're doing more business level metrics about qualified leads and connecting qualified leads to revenue and all that kind of thing, that might run through a RevOps org as you scale. So this is what we think about with RevOps, platform, process, perspective. And the idea with Operations Hub is that we introduced a new hub to sit at the center of these 3 things. So we want these operations people, these data people to be empowered to do more strategic work, which means we want to take a bunch of these more like manual processes off of their plate. Platform, process, perspective. The platform piece is all about integrations, integrating data, connecting systems together. Process is about more flexible automation. And then perspective is about data preparation and inching towards the world of business intelligence software. That's what Operations Hub sits right at the middle of. So I'm happy to take any questions or chat so far. I'm also just happy to kind of walk you through the features if that would be helpful about what's new with Operations Hub and how it ties back to all the things you're used to. Questions so far?
Yeah, I've never used it at all. So
Okay.
I've seen the product releases. So I'm familiar with the RevOps branding, but yeah, I know nothing. So I'd love to,
Cool.
get the high level.
Yeah, sounds good. So we'll just walk through this. I can show you the product if it's helpful or go a different direction. The first piece is platform. I think who was it earlier? Somebody, was it Josh who just said, or maybe it was Emilio who just said, I think of this as PySync. A big part of it is PySync. So PySync, for those who aren't aware, a couple years back, HubSpot acquired a company called PySync. They're a great team of people based in Ghent in Belgium. And they were actually, I just learned this the last few days, they were the top ranked integration platform on G2 Crowd. So like if you're familiar with G2 as a the rankings of software with Zapier and with Workato and with all these different like what they call iPaaS solutions that connect data from different systems, PySync was a leader in that crowd. We purchased them in 2019. We spent a whole bunch of time integrating their team and their technology into the HubSpot platform. What that tangibly means is we now have a new engine that powers our HubSpot built integrations. And it's this industry leading engine that we bought back in 2019. What makes them better is that most integrations, if you think about it, they tend to be one direction. Like if you've ever used a Zapier before or something like that, when something happens one-off in one system, it triggers something to happen in another system, just on a one-off basis. It's one field at a time. It's like one record at a time. The difference with this former PySync technology, now what we call data sync, is that it's both directions and it's real time and it's full synchronization. So instead of like, if you hooked up your HubSpot to your Microsoft Dynamics, instead of just one-off fields at a time, it's all your records, all the fields, fully synchronized, 24/7 real time automatically. And the other piece of that I mentioned here is historical data. So oftentimes people use data sync as a way, like if you're just getting up and running with HubSpot or you're just integrating another system for the first time, you can pull all your historical records in and not have to worry about like all the imports and exports into Excel to get up and running. So really tangibly what that means is since we launched in April with this Operations Hub data sync, the former PySync, we launched with 20 integrations. Just in like whatever it is, 6 months, we're up to 80. We've like quadrupled the number of integrations. So the great thing about this new engine is we can build really fast and in a really agile way. We're past 80 integrations. Some of them you see on the left or on the right, these are HubSpot built, HubSpot supported, really simple and powerful integrations. Dynamics, this is Google Contacts, Outlook, Stripe, MailChimp, Xero, NetSuite, Zendesk. We launched Pipedrive, we launched Sugar CRM, we launched Pardot in the last, like, as many, like, we're just taking the kind of short tail, I guess, short tail of the most popular integrations and building them out inside of HubSpot. So that's the free and the starter tier of Operations Hub. It's the free version, which you all have access to if you're HubSpot customers. You get all these integrations. The starter tier is $50 of Operations Hub, and that soups up the integrations just a little bit. So instead of just the default information, like the first name and the last name and the email and just syncing the records back and forth, if you have custom information living in the different systems, that's $50 a month to sync with Operations Hub Starter. So yeah, that's the kind of first piece, is those new integrations. We have happy customers. That's a quote from a happy customer who synced Dynamics 365. And this is a part of, and then I'll pause. I saw, Josh, you looked like you had something on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, no, just, yeah. I was reading that quote and I really liked it. I was like, that's really encouraging.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like, even just these integrations alone bring such value. Like I've talked to so many customers who have like paid $1,500 to a month to like have a Dynamics HubSpot integration that does what this now does for free.
Yeah.
And that alone can mean such like operational efficiency, and yeah, these guys saved hours of work. So
Oh yeah.
somebody's happy.
Mhm.
So that's a part of, we have this data sync collection. It's the former PySync. It's growing every day. It's up to 80. That's a subset of all the integrations in the HubSpot library, most of which are built by folks that aren't HubSpot and are not using this new data sync engine. But it's worth mentioning here that if you have tools that don't hook up to HubSpot, the chances are pretty good that there's an integration already, whether it's data sync or not. And all the apps in the app marketplace, for the most part, are free as long as you have licenses to both of the systems that they integrate. And we're almost at 1,000. I think we're going to pass that threshold soon, of which I had mentioned 80 are with this new former PySync engine. So that's the first piece. I should say, if one of the big questions is just like, hey, I'm using this other app, does it hook up through data sync? The way to figure that out is if you go, like if you're in your portal, just go into my portal. And if you just go to the app marketplace, I just went up here to the little house, to the app marketplace. That's where the integrations live. There's this new data sync built by HubSpot over on the left. That's these new former PySync integrations. There's 82 now. And if you search here, you'll be able to figure out if there's a data sync integration or if there's any other integration for that matter. So I'm going to pause there. Are there questions about data sync or about PySync? Do you want to see it? Or we can move on.
I just want to say that, yeah, this is for me, as I was telling, the part that I know the best about Operation Hub, because I used to use PySync before being acquired, precisely for that reason, Ari. As you mentioned, there are situations where clients, they are either happy or they just fearful of migrating from whatever tools they have all into HubSpot, especially CRMs and email marketing tools. And in the past, that was the use case for those scenarios where they wanted to keep the data sync for a little while, and then eventually they will migrate. But in the meantime, they had that, so it was a great use case. There is, however, and I know that this is not a meeting for feature requests.
Yeah,
it's more of a inquiry. Do you know if internally at some point that data sync will have the capability of deleting, within syncing deletions? Yeah, it's like if I delete a contact or if I delete a company on HubSpot or in the software that I'm syncing for, if that can be synced between them, because that's the only thing that I remember still doesn't happen.
Yeah, so there's a couple where it's a really good question where we launched with, I would say, like an early version, it didn't match up all the features that we had in PySync. And as we've gone, we've built up in a bunch of different kind of axes. One is we built more objects. So when we launched, you could just sync contacts between systems. And just in 6 months now, you can sync companies and you can sync deals as well. And we're working towards that. I mean, that's a kind of must have. If you're syncing Dynamics or another CRM, you need your opportunity data in HubSpot.
Yes.
So we'll work on the object front towards custom objects, towards event level data and all the other things you might want to sync. Another angle is kind of like field types. Right now, there's still some limitations in terms of the types of fields that you can sync between systems. You can't sync, I think, drop downs, any like kind of pick list values that it still has trouble with. That's another angle we're building towards that, and that's on the roadmap. And then I think the last is like the other bucket of functionality that still doesn't match up, one of which is deletion. On the roadmap as well, I don't have like a specific time frame for it. But yeah, it's kind of like we're building the objects, we're building the field types, we're expanding the set of integrations. We've gone from 20 to 80. We're expanding in all different directions, and we just we pick off these features little by little to build as we can. But it's a good feature request because that's important. There are other questions about data sync or ideas, thoughts? Are there systems you all are using that you're like, man, I wish that talked to HubSpot, that you're thinking you might explore one of these integrations with?
Well, yeah. So yeah, I'm new to this to the concept. I wasn't aware of the acquisition. That's a cool. Emilio, that you were actually using it before, and then that's kind of convenient, I guess. But so what are the main differences? Like first question that pops in my head is, what is the main differences between this and Zapier? Obviously, it's native to HubSpot, so you're probably going to get cleaner data, hopefully, and you don't have to have that extra step and that extra piece in your Marcom stack. But what are the other things that it does besides like a bidirectional sync between apps, or is that the main?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So is everybody familiar with Zapier? People know Zapier. Zapier is great. Like, I love Zapier. We've used Zapier in the past. They're a good partner of ours. A lot of customers use Zapier. I think like the main differences right now, one is it's a bidirectional sync piece. If you want just like a one-off, with Zapier, I've done it before where like a form gets filled out in HubSpot and it creates a row in a Google Sheet. And it's just like a one-way, one-off kind of a thing. That's what Zapier is. They call it a Zap. Like, that's what their bread and butter is. So I think that's the biggest difference. I think the other big difference is like data sync for now is, for me, the best iPaaS system for HubSpot integrations. So if you want to sync HubSpot with one of these tools, that's great. If you wanted to sync your Pipedrive with your Google Drive or your SendGrid with your MailChimp, the kind of third-party connections, like Zapier would be the thing to plug in there. I think those are the two biggest differences. We're building towards a world where you can do a lot of those Zap-like things from within HubSpot. So if you've been inside of a HubSpot workflow recently, I'll just pull up my portal. We're closing the gap in that direction. If you go into like a workflow, for example, just pop into a test one here. If you create a workflow in HubSpot, there's what we call like integration actions now, where in addition to being able to trigger something inside of HubSpot, you can kind of do the equivalent of a Zap, where it's like, there's all kinds of ones here, like maybe like an Asana task or something. When something happens in HubSpot, create an Asana task, create an Airtable task. There's all kinds of stuff here. So the bidirectional sync is a piece of it. I think over time we'll build more into the Zap-like functionality where you can actually trigger workflow actions and do the kind of one-off iPaaS classic stuff. But for now, I would say Zapier wins at the iPaaS stuff, and I would say we win on the bidirectional sync. We win on being HubSpot centric and one less tool in the stack, and they would win on, connecting any random tools that have nothing to do with HubSpot. But it's a good question. I think we'll continue to see folks use Zapier. Like, we're not trying to beat Zapier. I think they're great. I think just having better HubSpot built and HubSpot supported integrations is a win for everyone. Other questions as we go?
I just want to say I wasn't aware of that's available now. How do you call those? Are those actions on the workflows that are not HubSpot's?
I call that like an integration action.
Integration action.
Yeah. So like if you just go to a normal workflow and you have your actions you're used to, most folks probably have set up an email workflow where you're just sending an email in an automated way. There's just this other tab here for connect an app. And if you click over to there, you got a bunch of things. I think the most popular one in here is Google Sheets. So if you want to do something like you add a row to a Google Sheet when somebody fills out a form, or you do some, maybe, Josh, you do some of your sales reporting in Google Sheets, like a lot of us do. Like, this is super useful. Asana Zoom is in there as well. A lot of people do Zoom automation where somebody fills out a HubSpot form, it triggers a Zoom webinar registrant, something like that. So yeah, tons of useful stuff in here. This is actually for now not exclusive to Operations Hub. So if you have Marketing Hub Professional and you already have your workflows set up, you can get this set up today with no extra charge.
Great, thank you.
Cool. So cruising through a couple other features to show off that I think are super exciting. Depending on how technical and how advanced you are, they may be relevant. They may be something you are interested in, but have to call in a technical resource like me. But the second piece here is, that second P is process. Process is all about, as it sounds, it's connecting the automation across teams. The two things to highlight here, you all know workflows, you know and love workflows. One is data quality automation. And this actually, Zapier has a kind of equivalent to this that they call formatter, where you can add an automated step to a workflow that does data standardization. So a couple examples here, like it could capitalize the first letter of names, or it could update date properties, like to a certain, if you have European date properties and you have American date properties and you want them all to match, phone numbers, that kind of thing. I think a lot of us do like the export. It's like a one-off export once a month to like match up all the data and make sure there's not that many blanks and that the first names look okay for Kate for our email personalization, so we don't all caps yell at somebody, that kind of thing. So data quality is a step in that direction. It's to save the Excel work of cleaning up data and make it automated right when the leads come in or when the records come in. And I'll show you that really quick just so you know where it lives. That's also in workflows. If you're creating a workflow, it's a new action here called format data. And it's pretty straightforward. You just choose a property you want to format. Usually it's from the record that you're enrolling in the workflow. A good example here is just that first name. And then you choose what you want to do. You have all kinds of options here, from calculations to the date formats, timestamps. But I think, what is it? Change, capitalize the first letter would be the thing we want to do with that first name. And then we would output that right back into that property. So lead comes in, capitalize their first name, replace the existing value in their first name property so that when you send your sequence or your workflow email to them, it looks okay. That's one piece of that. That's at the professional tier. One thing you'll notice with the HubSpot packaging is that professional tier is where the automation tends to come into play, the email automation and marketing hub, the sales automation and sales hub, ticket automation and service hub, and an operations hub. Data quality is one piece of that. The other piece, which I think is super exciting, but a little bit more open-ended, is what we call programmable automation. Programmable automation essentially means that you can automate anything through HubSpot with just a couple lines of JavaScript. So if you write JavaScript or you write Python or you have somebody on your team that does, it kind of just makes the workflows in HubSpot infinitely flexible. We've seen these used, like maybe the best example, I'll skip over those, but essentially if anything, any system in the world that has an API, we can now automate it through HubSpot. So the light bulb example here is like, I think it was a customer and they had a support team who would take lunch in the middle of the day, and they wanted to set up automation so that if a ticket came in, a support ticket came in from like a high value customer, the light bulb in the support room would flash red. So somebody would know to go back from the lunch table to pick up the call. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, there was literally just a smart light bulb that had an API that could be written to. I had somebody set up like a Spotify automation where like when a big deal got closed, it would play like a super happy song on Spotify through their APIs. But like more practical examples here, lead routing is a big one where we have standard lead routing in Sales Hub, where if you just want to route 50-50 or round robin to a few different reps, you can do that. Like with JavaScript, you could do much more complex routing, whether it's 60-40 or different proportions. I saw one the other day where somebody had actually set up when leads came in, it would use JavaScript to look up, they were in the UK, look up the zip code, the UK zip code in a public record database to map that zip code to a specific county or region. And then they would map that region to the sales rep that owned that region and assign that lead to that sales rep. So that's the kind of thing where like you're talking to systems, you're doing calculations along the way. It would take like 5 lines of JavaScript to do that, but you couldn't do that anywhere else in HubSpot. And that's the kind of thing that this codable programmable automation is super useful for. Commission calculations, associations between records, data enrichment is an example. I saw this we had a company who's in real estate who, when a custom object came in that was like a real estate listing, they would ping Zillow's APIs to get information about the house, bring that back and populate the HubSpot record with information from the Zillow API, just using that quick JavaScript ping through workflows. So and really anything that you want to do, you can kind of automate. It's challenging because we all have to brainstorm like what needs automating along the way. But I think this is another nice quote here. I think Josh, you liked the quote earlier. This was from Connor, who's actually a partner of ours. It makes HubSpot infinitely flexible in terms of automation. They built ERP integrations, data enrichment, Spotify integrations, light bulb integrations. A sales rep at HubSpot set up a Domino's integration where when a deal got closed, he ordered a pizza for a sales rep. All kinds of things. And that's also an operations hub professional, that coded automation piece. So that's the second P, process. Questions on that stuff? It's a lot to take in, but you guys have questions or ideas on things you could automate using that coded automation?
That's like super hackable though, you know, like you could inject some malicious stuff.
That's not the intent, but yeah, I don't know. What do you mean? What's your vision?
No, I mean,
Trying to hack
you
us?
know, from like a DevOps
Yeah.
perspective, I mean, this is like you would have to be careful even internally and definitely with external partners who you would give access to for this. But on the flip side, like I also think of a problem I'm having where we have a custom SaaS tool that we actually sell and we actually use the tool we sell. It's a professional services automation SaaS platform. So it's for MSPs and it's to help them run their business. And we actually use it for our CRM. So it has a CRM. So we actually practice what we preach, right? We say, oh, we're going to use it. And then we also use, our HubSpot's CMS and for lead gen and the forms, obviously on that. So there's no integration. So like, I just imagine like in the future, some teams in desperation using this feature and just shoving, way too much code in this little feature and trying to maybe like circumvent the integration process. That's more of like a ops control issue that my head kind of goes to, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's super cool that it's powerful. I just feel like definitely you'd want to establish internal processes to make sure it's not abused.
Yeah, I think that's something we're thinking a lot about. I mean, I feel like the more open-ended a tool gets and the more powerful it gets, in some ways, like you're saying, like, yeah, the riskier it gets. We've also, even just like the people who write the code here, you got to be able to lock the code down so that if a mundane marketer comes in and wants to like do something, like you shouldn't let me touch it because then I'm just going to break it. So yeah, there are security considerations. I think we're doing a lot to build towards like better security around it. We have secret management. We have the way it kind of takes inputs and outputs from other parts of HubSpot makes it so you don't have to expose API keys in any kind of meaningful way. But yeah, I mean, it's totally fair point. Like if you use this wrong, or if you use it to shove too much information in a direction or in an insecure direction, it could be dangerous. We haven't seen it used in that way. But yeah, it's a fair point. One thing I'll just bring up while we're here, I think for those of us who are less technical, it's hard to think about what we might use this for. We're building out a library of use cases here that for folks who write code, this actually links to the code sample that you can use for it. But for folks who don't, like me, you're like, well, what do I need to automate that I can't already automate through my other system, like through the HubSpot I already have? There's a bunch of stuff here that you can do in Operations Hub that you can't do anywhere else. So we talked about looking up data in an external database. Pushing through an email validation service is one, like Kickbox is the example I've seen where an email comes in, you check it in a third-party system to see if it's a good email address, and you can bring that data back into HubSpot. Weighted lead rotation, all kinds of like nuanced tricks to like to the Salesforce integration that you might not be able to do out of the box, but you want to be able to do. You could write a couple lines of code to make that happen. Data formatting, contact deduplication. So I'll put this into the chat if it's interesting to anybody. You can check that out.
Well, that's quite helpful. So you don't start from scratch.
That's it. I mean, I think the power of it is if you want to start from scratch, you can. Like a lot of people saw this and immediately were like, let me get in there, put my code hat on and write some lines of code. But yeah, for the rest of us, I think this is a good place to start. The thing I've seen like our team did when we launched a RevOps function was we built a map of the entire customer experience, kind of like a line on a piece of paper. The top was what the customer experienced, and on the bottom was the internal process that we went through internally to create that for the customer, whether it was like a lead handoff or you know, a lead route or a ticket being created or onboarding kicking off or a call, like all the internal process. And we use that to identify gaps. And then we use that gap analysis to figure out where we might need something like this. And we're building out coded automation kind of based on the gaps that we found through that map. So yeah, it's a cool thing to explore. This is a part of Operations Hub Professional. If you have a use case for it, explore it, start a trial, check it out. We've seen some really, really cool stuff, like really kind of groundbreaking stuff for customers who automated things they would never have imagined they could do through HubSpot before. We've had folks drop Trey and Workato because they didn't need them anymore, just use HubSpot. Yeah, that's the second piece. I want to just do one more piece on the reporting functionality that just came out. And that's called data sets. That's the third piece, data sets. I'll kind of show you the before and after, which I think maybe will help. So the basic idea is in HubSpot, we have what we call the custom report builder. Are folks familiar with the custom report? Do you know what I'm saying when I'm talking about the custom report builder?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the custom report builder. It's this kind of blank canvas. It's really great. You can build a lot of stuff, but as you get bigger and you build more stuff in HubSpot, it can be overwhelming. And so the example of that is on the left here. This is what it actually looks like in our own HubSpot portal to build a report. We have 812 contact properties. And the names are like, you can see the naming conventions is do not use and RPG only and all kinds of things that somebody else created that I don't really understand. The idea with data sets is that you or your sales leadership or your ops team or your data leader creates a reusable table that acts as a starting point for other people who want to run reports in HubSpot. So it's super, I think about this as a kind of curation where like instead of 812 properties, you serve people this data set that they can reuse. It has the 3 properties that they need or the 5 properties that they need that are exactly what they need. They're called what they need. You can actually rename properties for reports with this new feature data sets. And then the last piece is calculations. So oftentimes when you want to create a table for someone, you want somebody to be able to use a different metric. So in this example, we use ARR, annual recurring revenue at HubSpot, but a lot of our data initially is monthly recurring revenue. That's how we close deals. So to convert MRR to ARR in the context of a report and be able to reuse that metric again and again in your reports, you can now do that in data sets as well. So this is the kind of before and after, confusing at first, and then after with this data set, when you start to build a report, and I'll show you what this looks like, it's easy to use and it's a more robust functionality set. So the quick run through of what this looks like in action, and then we can talk more about it. So if I come into my reports, when I initially build a report, I just hit create a custom report and I go through the builder. This is a kind of overwhelming process for anybody who's not data savvy. You're doing the join, right? You have to pick the data that you want to be reporting on. And then you get into the section where you have to choose from all your different fields. There's all this stuff and which one is the one that I want, and you have to do your dragging and dropping, whatever it is. The idea with a data set is instead of starting from scratch with your data source selection and your joins, you just go over here into data sets and you choose the data set that's already created for you. or that you've already created for someone else. You create your report. And then you only see that curated set of properties that they want you to see. Right. So it's that curation piece. The one other thing I'll show you is just within that, within the data set builder itself. So when you're creating that curated table, I'll show you what those calculations look like. They're actually quite cool. So here's where you build your data set, you build that curated table for everyone else to use. When you want to, you can create these new formula fields. And this actually looks a lot like Excel for folks who use Excel a lot. Things like, date differences. If you want to do reporting on, like, I know Kate from the marketing side, I often do reporting on like the time it takes to go from being a lead to being an MQL, or from the first conversion on a form into the first conversation with sales. That date diff can be used for anything like that. You have different truncation here. You have concatenation. So if you have like first and last name and you want to put both of those together in a column on a report, you could do that here with concatenation. All kinds of things you could do here. Week num, you can trim it. Even just like basic math here, like the example of ARR was, I just took MRR, that MRR field, and I multiplied it by 12. Like that's just the powerful thing of creating ARR. But the idea here, we've always had calculated properties where you could create a calculated property, put it onto a CRM record. But it was kind of annoying because, I mean, it's great in some senses, but it's a little annoying in that you don't necessarily want every calculation you run to bog down a CRM record with a new piece of information. Like you don't necessarily want all your sales reps to see your ARR calculation. You might just want to run that report or your commission or your profit margin or whatever those reporting level calculations are. So with data sets, you create these reusable tables. You can create those calculations, those formulas, just in the context of a report and not bog down the CRM for that information. So the idea here, again, with the operations-minded folks in mind, is that ops usually gets bogged down with all these reporting requests, these one-off reporting requests, because people don't know how to run their own reports. I'm a good example. Ops creates these reusable tables, and now I can run my own reports with full context, easy to use, with calculations, with right names, and all that. So that's data sets. That's in Operations Hub Enterprise, which we just launched. It's an enterprise. It's part of the CRM suite. So we have new pricing now where you get a discount if you buy all the hubs together. And Operations Hub obviously is a part of that. But yeah, that's the kind of quick rundown on Operations Hub. It's rooted in the operations professional, but as you can see, none of us work in operations, but a lot of these things I think would be useful: the integrations, the automation, the data set reporting, and the calculations. And the one piece, does anybody here use Snowflake? Anybody know if their companies use Snowflake?
It's databases in the cloud.
It's a database, exactly. Yeah, it's like a data warehouse. If you use Snowflake, or Emilio, if you have any clients that use Snowflake, really good new integration, super robust, also a part of enterprise, but we don't have to cover too much about that.
So an area this last pass that you show is very interesting. So I like what you're describing, like fields get calculated, but just in the data set, because it's very similar to what, all comparison aside, to what sometimes you do with forms, right? Where you need a field, but just for that form, and you don't need to create a field that gets that data stored for each contact, because it's just the information that you need for that particular event. So this feels very similar to that. But I have a question: is that this look like what in the CMS Hubspot is doing of separating the tools that a developer will need to build, like themes, and give the building blocks to maybe a marketer or a web designer, and just assemble without getting into the code. How do you call that separation on Operations Hubs? Like the work that someone will be building data sets and building calculated and bringing those data sets to someone that maybe is going to create the reports. What are the names of those, like, I don't know, job titles or responsibilities?
Yeah, I think it's an astute point to bring up. Like, it's similar in a way to the web developer, where like we as marketers, those of us who have worked as marketers, are used to like going to the web developer with one-off requests to, you know, this button is broken, this color is like, a developer in the same way as an ops person, if they spend their whole day doing that kind of reactive work, they're not doing the work they want to be doing, which is more interesting strategic changes to the website over time. So I think in both places, you're seeing HubSpot try to make even more power for operations people and developers, but also make it so that they can build reusable parts, custom modules, HubDB, so on. Oh, we have to go. Bye, Kate. Oh, Kate left. Bye, Kate. So similar concepts. I think in terms of like job responsibilities, on the ops side, I mean, I think the way that I've seen it happen, oftentimes as companies scale, sales ops is the first person to get hired. They kind of like have a sales team, and then one sales rep who's kind of analytically minded will pick up some of the reporting duties and the rotation and the territory assignment and the quota management and that kind of thing, little by little, until they convert into a full-time operations person or they hire a full-time operations person. The sales ops will be the first to go. But in general, I see people like who are the ones creating the data sets. There'll be operations people, or there'll be people who are operationally minded, data leaders, data analysts, data operations. I don't think it has to be that. Like, I think in a lot of places, like we're talking about, ops doesn't exist in that kind of specialized way. So I can imagine a world where, like, you know, Emilio, you as an agency partner, like you would create data sets that your clients could use because you didn't necessarily want them to have to run calculations for themselves or curate, you know, go through the different properties on their own. You just give them the curated set that they can work from. And that could be a use case. I could see like a marketing leader who just wants her marketers to be able to run their own reports. The marketing leader, the marketing director could create the data set. So really it's just about like, there's somebody that's managing the data, whether it's ops, an analyst, a marketing director, an agency, and then there's somebody who's using the data downstream. Whoever's managing the data is the one that will create the data set for everybody else. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of responsibilities that are in the frontier, right? Because as you're saying, it's probably right now it's a field that is developing rapidly, right? As reporting gets more complicated than in the past, and more questions are being expected to be answered from systems.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Very good.
Josh, Joseph, any other questions or thoughts, ideas as we went? That's a lot of words, but I don't know. Anything you see here that you're like, oh, I might check that out, or I could use that for even one of the free integrations, something like that?
I think that for me, it's more exciting to consider the possibilities that you know, sales ops would have with those other components for a better integration. So I'm still kind of like, just more than anything, just kind of fascinated by like, oh wow, this is possible.
Yeah. Love that. Do you have, so are you a director of sales? Like what's your title?
Yeah, I'm the business development guy, the sales manager. Yeah.
Do you have like sales ops? Who manages the platform process perspective? Is that you, or is that like?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I love that aspect of it, like thinking how this happened downstream and what does that.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the magic of the stuff, like we called it Operations Hub, but like, it's really just whoever's doing the operation stuff that this will be helpful. Like if you're a sales manager and you want your BDRs to be able to run some reports day to day, like you make the data set. It doesn't have to be an ops team.
Right.
Or you set up the integration to get their, or help them, like for BDRs, if like Google Contacts, to sync Google Contacts into HubSpot, or to sync Outlook contacts into HubSpot, and just make sure your database is like, that's a ton of value that you could set up that would save them a lot of that data entry. And that's free. So like, yeah, good thoughts.
No,
Joseph, yeah. Sorry, Josh, I interrupted you.
No. That it's been huge. That's been a big part of it, is just figuring out the integration pieces to save them time and all those pieces so that they can just get out there and do their job.
Yeah. Joseph, anything else? Other questions or ideas?
definitely still processing. That reporting feature, can compete with stuff that, I've used Domo in the past,
Yep.
even Google Data Studio.
Mhm.
For anything that's coming out of HubSpot. My mind, is thinking about campaign attribution fields and how I can consolidate that. Possibly. But yeah, I need to check if we have enterprise. I think we have enterprise, but I need to check if it's professional enterprise.
Yeah, you should check it out. I mean, I say a no strings attached trial, of course, a trial, like strings attached, you could buy it if you wanted, but like go in and explore. I'd honestly be curious your feedback. Gotten a bunch of questions about how this compares to Domo and that kind of thing. Like your expertise would be helpful to me as well. So if you want to just go in and trial it as like a user test, and I'm Ari at hubspot.com, ARI at hubspot.com. Let me know what you think and your questions and your first responses. That's
Yeah,
useful too,
that's
even if you
cool.
don't buy
So
it.
I forgot when this was released. Was this released in this quarter or
Just in the last couple of months? Yeah, the Operations Hub as a whole, the new pricing stuff was earlier in the year, and the coded automation, the JavaScript automation, but the data sets piece with the calculations was just in November, early November. So relatively new.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm mindful we're at time. I want to make sure I don't run y'all past into other meetings, but Emilio, thank you for bringing me on. I'm always happy to help out with these things, and you know where to find me now, Ari at hubspot.com.
Yes.
No, let me know how I can help.
Ari, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing this with us. Now I think I have a way better understanding of what Operations Hub is all about. And guys, thank you. As you know, I will go through the process of validating how the hub is going to evolve for next year. And I will keep all of you posted on that. And hopefully by the second half of the year, we will be able to have this meeting again in person.
Nice.
All right. Thank
Good
you,
luck,
everybody.
Have a happy holiday.
Thank you guys.
Stay tuned.
Happy holiday. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.